If you've been paying attention at all, the world is going into a period of potential global recession. What should you do? You're probably like, I'm going to raise this much millions of dollars to get to this next level where I can raise this many more millions of dollars to get to this next level. And you were on this cycle of raising more and more money. What's up, gang? It's Justin back with another video. This time we're going to talk about what to do if you're a founder facing a giant recession, because you might be one. If you've been paying attention at all, the world is going into a period of potential global recession. There's massive uncertainty. Stocks are down like 90%. Tech stocks are like failing. Crypto is in the toilet, and everybody feels like they've lost a lot of money and are depressed. And as it applies to you, the founder of an illiquid company with, that maybe doesn't have a public stock, this is a problem that you could choose to ignore right now, because it might seem that it's a little further out, right? Like your stock isn't down because it's a private stock, but I think it's really important that you pay attention to what's happening, because it can really affect your company in some pretty drastic ways. That main way is like your access to capital in the future. So if you're a founder that has been building in the environment of the last 10 years, you're probably like, I'm going to raise this much millions of dollars to get to this next level where I can raise this many more millions of dollars to get to this next level. And you were on this cycle of raising more and more money and expecting to be able to do so from the market. And that was a pretty reasonable expectation, because we were living in this hyper growth environment where investors, there was like this glut of capital. There was tons of capital that was chasing relatively few tech companies. There was this opportunity for you to take that money, apply it into growth, either good businesses or maybe even not so good businesses, and then raise money at a higher valuation, and then so on and so forth until you IPO'd this company and became a billionaire, right? And so like everyone was trying to do that. There's no shame in it. I've been known to try to do that myself before. It was kind of like what was happening with Atrium, where we raised a lot of money for what ultimately was a low quality business. The margins of the business were not that good. And if I still had that company in this current environment, we'd be fucked, to be honest, because nobody would want to fund that kind of company right now. If you're somewhere on that cycle where you were raising money to get to a certain milestone, future milestone where you could raise more money at a higher valuation, now is probably the time that you need to question your assumptions. I can't tell you how many friends of mine on this treadmill, they're on this path where they're executing a plan against fundraising in the future at a much higher valuation, and they're spending money against that, and it's probably not going to happen for them. This is people at the seed stage. It's also people at the Series D, Series E stage. What should you do? The number one thing I think you should do is figure out how to lower your costs significantly. So you've probably seen this happening, including at very big companies like Meta or Microsoft, all the way through much smaller companies. People are doing massive RIFs, reduction in force, right? Layoffs. That's one way. A lot of these tech companies have a huge headcount. That's one way to reduce your burn. Significant way is to reduce your headcount. I think that's painful to do, but something that every company should consider right now. But you should really consider everything that you can do to lower costs. So one thing we did in the last kind of recession, in 2008, I was running Justin TV. There was this downturn. There's RIP Good Times kind of meme that had been out there. What we did as a company, we didn't actually have that much of a headcount. It was a 25-person company, but we knew our prospects for raising capital were greatly diminished. Video advertising market was going to take a couple of years to actually turn into something at that point. So what we did was we had this management meeting every month where we thought, we listed all the ways that we can reduce the amount of money we're spending and all the ways that we can increase the amount of money we're making. And we would just write a list. We could save this amount of servers if we, delete, instead of storing videos for 14 days, we store them for 7 days. Or we can, add autoplay video ads to our homepage. Sorry about that. And so we just made these massive lists, and then we just figured out what was the highest ROI, lowest engineering cost for the highest, kind of potential revenue or reduction in cost, and we executed as much as we could that month, and we did the same thing the next month, the next month, the next month. And we actually turned into a profitable company way ahead of plan by just following that path. So, it doesn't just necessarily have to be reduction in force, although I encourage you to do it if you're considering it, because generally companies that have easy access to capital, so every tech company in the past 10 years, overhires. In Silicon Valley, there's this kind of mentality that your company is as valuable as how many people you have, right? Which is kind of like measuring the effectiveness of your airplane by its weight. It's actually better to have a smaller company with fewer headcount and more revenue per headcount. People in Silicon Valley, especially as you build the middle management layer, your middle managers in Silicon Valley, when they think about their career, their next job, they're going to be evaluated based on how big of a team did you have, how big of a team did you build. So their incentive is actually not aligned with yours as the founder in keeping the costs and headcount low. So you have probably built up maybe an unnecessary headcount. And in some companies I've been involved with, for example, they've ripped half the sales team, and it turns out there was like no decrease in sales productivity. Something like that might exist in your organization. It probably does. I would make you a bet that it does. If you don't have a huge company, right? If you aren't a Series B, C, D company that has like hundreds of people, let's say you're a seed stage company that just raised your first couple $1 million, you have the opportunity to be frugal from the beginning and not have to go through the painful process of laying people off, but just don't hire anyone. Like the best companies come from periods of constraint. I think Amazon is a great example where Bezos in the beginning famously made everyone make their own desk out of a door, which, honestly, a door is more expensive, I think, than a normal desk. But the idea was, he was like, it's a sign of being cheap and how cheap they are, And I think it's really important. If you build frugality in your company from day one, then you're going to have that's an operational advantage that you'll always have, even when you have easy access to capital. So now's your excuse. 5 years ago when we were setting up Atrium, office space in San Francisco was like $90 a square foot, right? It was like super expensive and kind of felt like we had to have this big office and provide lunches and pay a lot because we were competing for this talent with all these other amazing companies that were doing the same thing. But now no one's hiring. And, so if you're hiring, you can probably get away with a lot less in terms of the employee benefits. And then also it's like a remote world, so you can be remote, not have an office. Now's the perfect time to build a company where frugality is one of the core values. If you do have to raise money, then you need to reset your valuation expectations. You might have had this expectation, like there's so many people I saw right before the recession hit, and they were saying, I'm going to raise money at these were like pre-product market fit companies. They're like, I'm going to raise money at $150 million valuation or Series B because our Series A was like 80. And, we think it's a reasonable step up and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you might want to modify temper your expectations. This is before there was a recession. And then, of course, they went out, recession kind of happened, and now they're like fucked. And so if you're a company that needs funding to continue, then ultimately you're a price taker in the market. And so in general, if you're going out there, I wouldn't be saying like, oh, I'm raising money at X valuation. I would just be saying, hey, we need this much capital, and seeing what the market will bear. Don't set an expectation that seems too unreasonable. Otherwise, investors are just going to like stop talking to you because they're going to be like, this is an insane valuation. It doesn't make sense in this market. Goodbye. Investors, I think in general, are waiting for valuations to reset because nobody wants to top tick the market and be the fool who like bought in, during the recession at yesterday's valuation. The last thing is that I think a lot of people think that this is a temporary. And so I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think we've been through this 10-year technology cycle where people would value companies in a certain way, but I don't think it's necessarily going back to that anytime soon. So I think you need to build for the new environment. And what's the new environment? People are valuing, profitability, margin in your business, just like way more than they're valuing growth alone, right? So you kind of need to focus on those things first. And then obviously if you're a startup, you still need to grow. There's a lot more weight on the bar now. And you might think that that's not fair, or have wishful thinking that you could go back to the other environment, but that shit doesn't exist right now. And I don't think you can count on it existing anytime soon. So reset your expectations and build for this new world. Lastly, exits. So if you were counting on an exit, well, first of all, that's stupid because companies are bought, not sold. You can never count on an exit. But especially in this environment, it's going to be a buyer's market for anyone who has cash, whether it's private equity or it's one of the FANG companies or whatever. There's going to be a ton of companies that are walking dead, have too much cruft. They have like not figured out a business model that supports their cost structure. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for companies to buy, kind of dying dead companies, acqui-hire companies. But if you're planning on selling your company, well, you can't plan on it. So stay lean and grind it out. All right. So, if you're a founder out there, wishing you the best of luck. It's a period of great opportunity. I think when there's a lot of change and there are contractions in the market, it washes out, the tide goes out on all the shitty companies, the people who aren't like willing to grind it out, the founders who are more like scenesters. And now's your opportunity to build something. A lot of my friends build amazing companies during periods of time of recession. A lot of the last cycle came from, a lot of amazing companies came from that, including like an Airbnb, Uber. And so, I think there's going to be the same here. So good luck. You're going to need it.